Thank you very much. Yes, we've had a marvellous year celebrating the 30th anniversary of the miners' strike, the great miners' strike. And it's right that we should have done that. For one thing, we've had lots of meetings and we've had many marches. And it's given us an opportunity, as Mel has pointed out, to make people aware, especially people who weren't born at the time of the miners' strike, what that strike was about, because it's ingrained in the history, the industrial history of this nation. And the miners' national banner, it carries the slogan, "The past we inherit, the future we build." And we've had a wonderful year, but you know, we have to learn from that year. It always has to be with us. It always has to be part of us, and it has to be passed down in the folklore of working class history. But in learning from that, we have to move on. And we have to move on to the future we build it. But we also, at the same time, have to address those issues that are facing our people out there now, right at this moment as I speak. Again, it's true what Mel said. Unions, as good as they are and as good as they've been, there are a lot of people that don't identify with them. It's very difficult for the young mother on a council estate somewhere, struggling along to feed her children in this climate, to understand where a trade union fits into her life. And somewhere along the line we have to change that. So tonight I'm going to talk about austerity, and I'm going to talk about how it came about, who's to blame for it, and perhaps how we begin to fight back. And I want to say right at the outset that I do not refer to this global economic crisis as a recession. I refuse to do that, because a recession occurs as a result normally of the capitalist economic cycle. This crisis did not occur as a result of that. This crisis came about as a result of a cocktail of robbery, grand larceny, fraud, embezzlement, false accounting on an absolutely massive scale, massive tax evasion and tax avoidance, and an unprecedented transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich. That's how this crisis came about, not as a result of the normal swings of trade that happen in capitalist societies. Governments and politicians right across the globe are guilty. They are guilty of aiding and abetting those monstrous crimes that took place that now ordinary people are having to pay for. In 1979, in this country, we elected a free market zealot. And thank God the lady is not for returning. But in 1980 she joined up with Ronald Reagan because he was elected president in America. Another free market zealot.
Yeah.
And they built a global economy built on greed and greed and more greed. In fact, they didn't hide it, they actually boasted about it. They said greed was the best way to run an economy. And if the rich got richer and ever richer, then there would be what they called trickle down to the rest of us. They didn't say cascade down, they said trickle down. Well, even trickle down didn't happen. What happened was cascade going up, and they became ever richer. And these free market anarchists were let loose and given free rein to do exactly as they wished. The economies of the world were deregulated, allowing those people to run riot through the global economy like a plague of locusts, gobbling up wealth in an orgy of greed and keeping it unto themselves. Governments across the world, led by right-wing politicians, disciples of the Chicago School of Economics, they were mad. And they came to us with their idea of how economies should be run. It was garbage. And that's what happened. It led eventually to a global systemic collapse, taking the economy of the world to the edge of oblivion. It was, and it still is, that bad. Regulators with no teeth fell asleep at the wheel, or were sidelined, or were every bit as corrupt as the bankers and financiers themselves. None of these criminals has been punished. They've gone unpunished. None have been charged with any crime. And we know that even in recent days with HSBC. If anybody ought to have been investigated for criminal activity, it's them, but there won't be any. And you could tell that from the way that Cameron was questioned in the House and the answers he gave. No way are they going to hunt down and bring to justice those people. All of these people remain at large, enjoying the proceeds of their crimes. They make Ronnie Biggs look like a small-time pickpocket. And as for the Brinkmat's gold bullion robbery of a few years ago, three tons of gold pales into insignificance when compared to the crimes of this outfit. In fact, really, they redefined what theft is in recent years. Because if the mother, single mother, with a child, a baby, has got this horrible dilemma, the baby's crying because it's hungry, and across the road there's a supermarket packed with food. What a position to be in. Hey, what a position to be in. Does she let the baby go hungry? No. Does she go across and get some food out of that supermarket? I say yes. But they've redefined theft. She's a criminal. My God, is she a criminal. But if they steal from us billions and billions of pounds, well, they're too big to prosecute. And we do nothing whatsoever about it. We're all now called upon to be ragged-trousered philanthropists, to rescue the global economy, while these people are at liberty to indulge in mis-selling, liberate, fixing, foreign exchange, manipulation, money laundering, and helping their rich clients to evade or avoid tax. The strange thing is, which fits in with what I've just said, is that the whistleblower is the criminal. The whistleblower gets sacked. And this is what they said about her. They said that whistleblowers are data thieves. Data thieves. Compare that to the billions and billions of pounds that they have stolen and are getting clean away with it and setting up their clients to avoid paying their fair share into this system. And I'll tell you what, that makes them the biggest scroungers in our society, no matter what anybody says about that. Like all those with the gambling addiction, the bankers and financiers believed that they could eliminate the risk of lending money. And so they created a massive pyramid or Ponzi scheme based on what they preferred to call innovation. They made Las Vegas look like a haven of moderation when it came to gambling. The first big so-called innovation was known as the credit default swap. Now you may have heard of it, but it's basically the thing that brought down the world's economy. These instruments, as they called them, amounted to an economic nuclear bomb. And the fallout from that is going to be with us all for many years to come. Credit default swaps amounted to an elaborate labyrinth of insurance scams that grew into an out-of-control monster of destruction. You see, when they were the banks had these debts on their balance sheets from lending money to people, they were always afraid that people would default on those debts. So they wanted a way to be able to dispense with that risk. And the way that they set about doing that was with these credit default swaps. And they went and got other banks, financial institutions, companies, local authorities, municipal authorities in America, councils in this country, for a premium to insure them against those defaults on the banks going the wrong way. And when they managed to do that, they believed that they shifted all the risk off the balance sheet. You see, they were then able, because they thought they no longer got any risk, they thought they were then able to lend money like confetti to everybody and sundry. I mean, you must have had it where you walked into a supermarket and the first person you meet is someone who was trying like mad to get you to take a credit card. Everybody could have 6. They were prepared to just give out loans to everyone. And one area where they wanted to do that was what was called the subprime market in America. People who normally couldn't afford a home. People who normally were unemployed. People who didn't have any real incomes. But they could get mortgages. They could get mortgages now under this lot because they thought we have no risk. We have no risk. These people that have taken no credit default swaps have got the risk. They're the ones that are going to pay, not us. And every time they manage to get one of these people to sign up for a mortgage, guess what they got? Bonuses. Big bonuses. In mid-2005, and it's not that long ago, credit default swap contracts out there in the global system amounted to $12 trillion. $12 trillion. And to get that into perspective, that's as large as the entire American economy in default swaps. Gambling. Believing that they could achieve something that no one had ever been able to achieve before. Eliminating risk. Every gambler would love to be able to eliminate risk. We all would love to back the horse that's a certainty. A certainty, but there's no such thing. What happened was that the debts were sitting there on the balance sheets of the banks, and they were massive, and they were building up and building up and building up. You see, one of the things about debtors, and any bookmaker or consultant will tell you, debtors on balance sheets are assets. Might seem strange to you, but they are. For instance, to give you a simple example, a guy called Bill has £1,000 in the bank. His friend comes along and says, "Can you lend me 100 quid?" And he thinks, well, he's a decent bloke, I've known him a long time, I've lent him money before, he always pays me back. And he lends him £100. Now how much is Bill worth now? And you might think £900, because that's what he's now got in the bank. And you'd be wrong. Because an accountant would say, he's got £100 in the bank, sorry, £900 in the bank, and he's got £100 with his friend. So he's still got £1,000. And when you think about it, it makes sense, because you can look at it the other way round. When you put money in a bank, you're lending it to the bank. And you could say he's got £100 with his friend, and he's got £900 he's lent to the bank. We're all lending money to the banks now, you know, interest-free, at the moment. So these assets, they had to do something with them, and they started hiding them in offshore accounts. Special investment vehicles, they call them, but making sure that this debt didn't appear on the balance sheets of the banks. It was corrupt. Corrupt. But no one has ever faced prosecution for it. So if you multiply that by hundreds of billions, if not trillions, of times across all banks in the global economy, you start to grasp why they are trying to blame benefit cheats for this crash. It's all about trying to deflect your attention from the real crooks that have brought down the global economy. That's what it's about. They built the massive pyramid scheme, not us. They built the Ponzi scheme that collapsed, not us. Let me tell you a recent story about the Royal Bank of Scotland. This is just one bank of many, but it's worth concentrating on it just for a moment. It's 81% owned by the British taxpayer. You and me. 81%. The Chancellor of the Exchequer sacked the Chief Executive only at the end of 2013, I think it was. His name was Stephen Hester. And he brought in someone else to run the bank. He's an Australian. Call him Ross McEwen. Before he even started work, he was given a 3 million golden hello from a bank that's owned by you and me. Before he'd even struck a bat, before he'd even sat down at his desk, he got £3 million to put in his pocket. That's the kind of class conflict that we're in, as Mel has pointed out. But then they declared that they had 38 billion pounds of bad debt on their balance sheet. 38 billion pounds. And do you know how they got around that? They created two banks. And this is what they call them. It's not me. You can find it anytime you want to look on the internet. They created a good bank and a bad bank. And they took the 38 billion and they put it in the bad bank. And then they operate the good bank, which by the way is still not in profit, but they're trying to get the good bank into profit with the 38 billion shoved under the carpet. What do you think they're going to do when they get that good bank into profit? He's looking to do it now. Sell it back to the bankers that wrecked the place so they can have it again. But who's going to end up with the 38 billion bad bank? Already they are saying, look, we're reducing that 38 billion. It's getting lower. It's down by 8 billion. It's down to 30 billion. And I was doing a bit of thinking about that. And I thought, well, people haven't had increases in wages. How come these people who couldn't pay their mortgages suddenly can pay them now? Well, they can't. I'll tell you how they're reducing that. They're reducing it by repossessing people's homes and throwing them on the street so that they have to sleep indoors during the winter so they can have their house and put it back onto the bank's balance sheet. These are the kind of people that we have to deal with. Only on Friday, Royal Bank of Scotland, 81% owned by you, paid 72 of their top people more than £1 million each. Think about that. For repossessions, 21,000 repossessions in 2014. That compares with 4,870 in 1981. In 1981, interest rates were 14.16%. Now it's 0.5%. With 4,000, nearly 5,000 repossessions in 1981, we've got 21,000 now. Why? Because the banks are grabbing that property back and putting it onto their balance sheets to fill up the black hole. That's the kind of people they are. So much for a few people wrongly claiming housing benefit being responsible for the global economic crash of 2007 and 2008. It absolutely beggars belief. Low wages, of course, have been pointed out, another example of how they wrecked the world's economy. Low wages in order, of course, to have higher profits. The contradiction is that if people have got low wages, then they can't consume. They can't buy in the high street. And if they can't buy in the high street, that is profits anyway. So they had to get round that. And the way they got round that was that credit card I referred to. If they let you have that credit, then they're building up your wages so that you can spend, because they need you to spend, but they need you to have low wages as well. It's an absolute contradiction in any economy. And it can't work, because sooner or later low wages will not be able to facilitate consumer spending or credit card debt. And I think if Karl Marx was on this platform this evening, and I'm no student of Karl Marx, but I know a bit about him, I think if he was here, he would say that credit card debt is the unpaid wages of the working class. I was looking at the Forbes list of the top 10 billionaires, the top 10. They have a total wealth of $556 billion. $556 billion for the top 10. You can easily find it, it's available on the internet. When I was making this speech about 3 years ago, it was $410 billion. It's gone up by 35% in about 3 years, their wealth. It builds up while they're asleep in bed. But here's the interesting bit. The national debt of Greece is $385 billion. Now that is $171 billion less than the wealth of the top 10 people in the world. In other words, they could pay off the Greek debt. They could have $171 billion left over. They could share it out among themselves and still have 17 billion apiece. That's the kind of world that we now live in. And when they tell you that they are paying this money out for the Greek people to get them out of some kind of mess of their own making, don't believe it, it's not of their making at all. And in any case, the Greek people only receive about 15% of the bailout money. The rest of it goes to the banks in Greece to fill the black holes to which I have referred. The establishment now is really worried because they know that they've still got to address the black holes on those banks, the printing money in Europe hand over fist. It's still a problem, and the last thing they need in this country or any other country is a left-wing government coming to power. But the establishment's clever. They have created a party on the right, UKIP. And they've created that party on the right because they know that will drag the Tories further to the right, it will drag the Liberals further to the right, and it will drag Labour further to the right. That's the reason why UKIP suddenly came from nowhere, could hardly get 2% in an election, and they're now likely to win quite a number of seats. All the main parties in this country are austerity parties. And that goes for the Labour Party as well. And the reason I say that is because Labour says it's not going to return the cuts that the Tories have made. That makes them an austerity party. They say that they are going to sort out the national debt, but who's going to do it? You and me. They've always been an austerity party. Tony Blair was an austerity Prime Minister. I remember him in the House of Commons on his last speech there, and looking at the Tories he said, "You'll miss me when I'm gone. You'll miss me when I'm gone." You may remember him saying that. And by God, I'm going to tell you what, they were quiet. He was the best Tory Prime Minister they've ever had. So we have to try to build alliances with anti-austerity forces around the world. In Greece, in Portugal, in Italy, in Spain, and across America. Wherever they are, we have to build alliances with them. We must use social media. As Mel has pointed out, 30th anniversary of the miners' strike. Tremendous. They're striking back, which is another one which you ought to visit. Fighting against austerity, fighting for our class, and we have to use social media as much as we can. Otherwise, after the next election, we will be left to deal with the bad banks. I will leave you with this quote. It's a quote from someone who was the deputy editor of the Financial Times. Yeah. I don't know what she is. I don't know what her politics actually are. But she's currently in America, where she's managing the Financial Times in New York. She wrote a book called Fool's Gold. It's a very good book, I have to say. And writing about the banks that went bust, like Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers, she said that they had extensive experience in dealing with mortgage-backed bonds. And they prided themselves on running tight risk controls. As they each cranked up their credit default obligations, they realized that the risk was becoming like a toxic byproduct of a chemical experiment or waste from a nuclear reactor. But no good solution occurred to them, and they would not switch off the machine. That tells you who was to blame for this crisis. It's not you, it's not me. We know it was. We are not the perpetrators of this crisis. But my God, we are the victims of it. Thank you very much.